Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Angie and this is Cover Spines and Pages. And this is my version of BookTube Newbie Tag. BookTube Newbie Tag is a list of questions that are listed on the BookTube wiki, which is found on fandom.com. I thought this was really kind of fun and figured it was a good way to introduce myself. I have another video out already, so if you've been to my channel before, you probably already know a little bit about me. But this is my opportunity to dive in a little bit more to who I am and what this channel, I guess what I hope this channel will be. So I have my list of questions over there, maybe some notes in front of me, and I apologize if I don't engage completely with you for brief seconds while I get those out and get them in order. So the first three questions are all kind of, I don't know, I think that they're all kind of the same thing. And rather than answer them independently, I'm going to put them all together and answer them together so that I'm not being redundant in my answers. So the first three questions are, why did you start this channel? What are some fun and unique things you can bring to YouTube? And what are you most excited to add, or what are you most excited about for this new channel? I actually don't really have a good solid answer for this. And the reason for that is because I'm still kind of working out what my niche is. There's some conflicting information out there about whether you should just get out there and start, or you should figure out what your niche is before you get started. And I kind of just decided to get started and learn what that niche is as I go, because, well, because I just really don't know. I'm still figuring out what kind of reader I am and what kind of books I still like, because I'm pretty new to this new reading experience. And because I'm new, like, I can't say, oh, I want this channel to be all about fantasy, or I want this channel to be all about romance. I mean, it's probably never going to be all about romance no matter what, but it's definitely not going to be, it's not going to be a genre thing. I know that. But what I do know is that there's a lot of content out on YouTube that I really enjoy watching. And those are things like TBR videos or games and reading vlogs. And I'm particularly fond of things like author highlights and collaborations between other booktubers. But really, the main reason that I want this channel is for community. And I know that sounds cliche because everybody says it, right? But it really is about community for me. To me, it's about, first of all, the macro community, which is you and even me, the people that are watching YouTube and engaging in YouTube and commenting and getting on to book clubs and things like that all together. That's this big community that you get to share your bookish love with. And I'm really drawn to that. And then on a micro level, booktubers have the most fun, in my opinion. They get to engage with each other in ways that we don't engage with them. And that is collaborate together to do things that are just fun. I think they get to do so much together, either online and even in person sometimes, that the greater community isn't necessarily participating in unless we jump in on readathons that they have collaborated together to do. And those are the kinds of things that I'm excited about in having a YouTube booktube channel. The next question is, why do you love reading? And I might get off on a big tangent here, and if I do, I'm really sorry, but I feel very strongly about why reading is important in general and why it's important to me particularly. And that is because reading gives me a safe space to feel things and to work out the things of the world, right? So the other day I was on a bookish community and I had just read a book that was hard. The themes were hard. To me, it was a devastating story. And I posted something about it. And one of the comments, multiple comments actually, that I got in there, they said, "I'm so sorry that you had that in your book. The world gives us enough of that." And I thought, but that's precisely why I really liked this book, was because it went into some hard things that, while we deal with those things in the world in maybe a more realistic way, sometimes it's harder to process them when they really truly affect you and the people around you and the world you live in. But on, in a book, you have the opportunity to look at a character individually and see what they think, how they're feeling, um, what led them to make the decisions that they made. And does it justify it all the time? No, but it still gives you an insight that you don't necessarily see in the real world. And I think that being able to see that in characters gives you the ability to build compassion in your heart for people, based on the fact that there are often times when we engage with a character that is morally gray, or I think they're morally gray, or they make bad decisions, or you think they're annoying because you get to read every thought that's going through their head, or whatever the case may be. You learn about them and you learn why they make the decisions they did. And we often like characters that might otherwise be considered villains in the real world, because we don't necessarily see what they're doing and thinking leading up to the things that they do. So there's that. And then I think it's good to see social commentary in books in a way that isn't real. We can develop how we feel, or I can develop how I feel anyway, about specific social constructs or interpersonal relationships and things like that. And it's nice having a safe space to sit and ponder on those things. And then, aside from all of that, reading is just fun. I have control over what I read, when I read, how much I read. And there's not a lot of hobbies and things in life that you have that much control over. Reading's just, it's mellow, and I like that part about it. So the next question is, what series got me into reading? Dragonlance Chronicles, which is Tracy Wise and or Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman collaboration. There's a whole bunch of those books, but there's that particular trilogy, which is the Dragonlance Chronicles. And I would say that got me into reading for a good long time. And then I didn't read for many years. And I wouldn't say that it was necessarily a series that got me back into reading. I just decided at some point I wanted to read, and then I started watching some YouTube stuff and ran across the Herkid reading challenge, and that's actually what got me back into reading, because I like big challenges that I look at and I think, oh, I'll never finish that, but I'm going to try it anyway. So that's what got me into it to begin with. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? One, will you collaborate with me on something? Will you work with me and work on a project? That would probably be a question, because that's part of why I started this channel, was to get into those types of communities and get to do things like that. Then probably, what do you use for video editing? Because right now my husband helps me with my video editing, and he uses something on his computer that every time we start editing, I'm thinking, this is too complicated. I don't think I'll ever do this on my own. But I know that there's easier stuff out there. And so I would like to know what they use and what kind of things makes editing and all of this extra stuff, in addition to talking to a camera, easier. And then the other question I would ask is, what are your best resources for content? Because I feel like there's a lot of very similar content out there, and I enjoy most of those things. Like I said, I like the content that includes TBRs and things like that. So that's all good, but sometimes we need inspiration for something new and interesting. And I hear them talk about book projects all the time, and I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily in the know about what those projects end up looking like in the end after they've said that in their TBR videos. When did you start reading? And I probably should have looped this question in with the what series got me into reading, because that was probably answered there. And that's really that I've been reading off and on for most of my life. But this time around, I've only been reading since June. So, yeah. Where do I read? Most of the time, I read on my couch downstairs. And I read here sometimes too, but actually not too terribly often because it's not super comfortable. And it's right underneath the heat and air conditioning. So either it can be too hot or too cold, depending on what time of year it is, just because I'm sitting right underneath the blower. But I also read in bed at night. Sometimes I like to take my Kindle and read for a while when I'm getting ready to go to sleep. It helps, I don't know, it helps put me in the right mindset to go to sleep, which is funny because I'll literally be reading a book and say, oh, it's time for bed. And then I'll grab my Kindle and I'll go read a different book and go read in bed. So that's where I read most of the time. And then I listen to audiobooks in the car and at my desk when I'm working and whenever I can otherwise. And then what do I like to read? So my favorite genre right now is fantasy. I prefer high fantasy or epic fantasy. I do enjoy some romantasy. My problem with romantasy is just that most of it has a lot of spice in it, it feels like. And while those books have really great stories, I just don't enjoy the spice. And I will skip over it or skim through it or fast forward through it if I'm listening to an audiobook, because I'm just not interested in the open door part of it, particularly because sometimes it's it's very explicit and I get uncomfortable when I read things like that. So that's not my favorite part. But that being said, those are still really good stories. Like I thoroughly enjoy A Court of Thorns and Roses and the Fourth Wing series and Quicksilver. They all have amazing stories. I just don't like the smutty part. So I usually skip over that. And in some cases that will take up a good chunk of the book. So like when I read Bride, it was a really great story, but most of it had, or well, I would say a good chunk of it had a lot of spicy scenes, and it was just too steamy for me to read them. And so I would say a good fourth of the book I just had to skim through, which seems kind of wasteful. Wouldn't it be awesome if they made books the same way that they make music for the radio? Like there's songs out there that have explicit content in them, and you can listen to them in all of their glory on Spotify or whatever. But if you hear that same song on the radio, it says something different because they've cleaned it up for public consumption. And I sometimes wish that there was a market for books where they did the same thing, so that I could read something like Fourth Wing that didn't include all the steamy scenes in it, because it doesn't take away from the story if you take that stuff out of it. You really could make it closed door and it would still be, in my opinion, would be a better book. But I know a lot of people really dig that stuff about it, and that's fine. That's no judgment here. But I also enjoy other things. Like I enjoy a romance, particularly like a holiday romance. Those are fun for me. And I'm not just talking Christmas. So if it's a Halloween romance or a Valentine's romance or something, I like those. I like some literary fiction, and I read a little bit of nonfiction. And what else? I like historical fiction. Oh, and I love sci-fi. And if you listen to my or watch my last video, you probably already heard me say that I really like dystopian stories. So whether that's in sci-fi or fantasy, those two particular genres with a dystopian setting is probably my favorite. I didn't think it would be until I've read enough books and I've read enough books now to say that those are always the ones I have the most fun with. Now, if it was a literary fiction type thing and it was set in the real world and was dystopian, I don't think I would enjoy that as much because all I have to do is read the news. That's probably enough for me. Let's see. I think I only have one more question, and that is my book collection. You can see, pick up my camera. These are, I know this is such a bad way to do this, but I don't know how else to go about it. Those are my most recent books. Now, if I could just get my camera back to where it was, this was probably a bad idea. My camera is kind of precarious on two different area rugs. So this is where all my newer stuff is and all my stuff I'm looking forward to reading, or it's part of series that I'm in the middle of, things like that. I have a couple of other areas in the house that have books. There's a big bookshelf on the other side of this room that has a lot of nonfiction, some religion, a lot of theology, um, science books, old homeschool books. And I say old, but I homeschooled my granddaughter the last 3 years, so a lot of those they're relatively recent. And then I have books scattered throughout the rest of the house. And I should probably at some point pull those all together because they've been laying around the house for years. When I've been in the mood to pick up a book, most of the time I'll pick it up and read a little bit and then give up on it, or used to. So yeah, they're kind of everywhere in this house, and at some point I'll gather them all up and do a big unhaul of them or shelve them or something other than leave them collecting dust in various places around the house. But that's that's pretty much it. That's my BookTube Newbie Tag questionnaire answered for you. So if you happen to think of any other questions that you are curious about, want to know about me, or if you have any feedback on this video, I would welcome your comments down below. Please hit that like, hit that subscribe, all those fun things that you do. And I'm super excited to have you as part of my community. See you later. We'll catch you next time.